swagger, okay? Regardless of what happens out there. Doesn't matter. Keep your swagger.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 5-Hole Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I'm your host, TJ Branson, coming to you live from San Francisco. Bit of a weird schedule this weekend for me personally. It got called, I think, at like 3 p.m. yesterday for a red-eye trip. And usually I like to go around 9 o'clock on a Saturday night for this week preview, but I was 30,000 feet up there. So I'm going today just at a random time. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me here on the 5-Hole Fantasy Hockey Podcast. You guys can find us on Twitter at FHFH Hockey and the Fantasy Hockey Discord right here on the YouTube channel if you guys are watching live. And throw us a sub, likes, whatever YouTube's doing nowadays. All right, microphone's on the right setting. I have this like whole mobile setup here. I'm literally on an ironing board, and that's where my computer's at. Ironing board. I've got the microphone on a different table so that everything's working out. It's a little unconventional, but thanks for joining us. Thanks for sticking with me. Let's get into the week preview. Lots going on here in week 21. We're gearing up for the playoffs. Some folks are starting their playoffs this week, depending on how big your league is, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't matter because we are trying to win this week no matter what you're in, regular season, playoffs, whatever. This past week, lots of trades. We talked about the trade deadline. That's there on YouTube. I have I streamed like through the whole trade deadline. If you guys want to get some fantasy reactions, things like that, a little more in depth than what I'm going to be talking about here today on the pod, feel free to check that one out. It won't be in podcast form. There's just, as you're live streaming an event that like relies on news to come through Twitter, to come through, the insiders, whatever, there's a lot of dead air. So it wouldn't make good radio. So that's just going to be on YouTube. All right. Val Nichushkin posted a hat trick. That was pretty dope. Mikko Rantanen got traded to the Dallas Stars, put up a goal. Very impactful in his first game there. Looking pretty solid. Rupe Hintz got hurt in that game. Matt Duchene took over on the top power play, but it looked like Duchene was the guy that got moved down for the top power play. So we'll see what happens with Hintz if that's a long-term thing. Even strength, we're going to see how the lines shake out on that one too. In New Jersey, Jack Hughes, Dougie Hamilton, they're out long-term. Both of them. Hughes done for the season. Dougie is going to be out a while. We don't know. Luke Hughes is an absolute must-add. But if you need defense, I like him. We've been talking in the Discord a lot about like Mason Lowry, guys. Who was the other guy we were talking about? Faber, I think, kind of like all in the same. Don't quote me on that one, but I think like there's a tier of like, yeah, I guess they're good enough power play one guys. So I like that. Boston sold off in a huge way, and they've been doing it for a little bit now. Trent Frederick went a while ago. Brazeau goes, Marchand goes, Carlo goes, Coyle goes. They're I don't know if they're pivoting to be a builder or whatever, but that's going to be something worth investigating, a little more in depth in the offseason, the impacts that it's going to have on guys like Jeremy Swayman, David Pastrnak, the guys that we're leaning on to still be impactful, guys that, Pastrnak is going to be a first round pick in most fantasy redrafts. So, if he's alone on an island, like how do we value him? It's not like, a Charlie Coyle wasn't really propping him up too much, or Brad Marchand, yeah, but it's just it looks like a different Boston organization, and how they're going to be proceeding is going to be pretty telling. So at least we'll have this end of the season to see how Pasternak's doing. He's been God mode since January 1st, so I like what he's up to. Pittsburgh made a bunch of moves. They flipped Luke Shen. They traded Michael Bunting, just Beauvillier. They made a lot of moves, and during that live stream, during the trade deadline, I'm like, Jesus Christ, are they clearing out cap for Mikko Rantanen? Is that something that they're trying to do. And, I thought maybe Eric Carlson to Vegas was going to be a thing, but as we know now, that didn't happen. But yeah, they have 30 picks over the next 3 years in the draft. So good on Pittsburgh to really start making things look like there is a solid future as everyone ages out. Like Crosby's always going to be Crosby. Pittsburgh game's on right now. Pittsburgh, Minnesota. Just started the second period. Figured I'd get it going during the intermission so that I wouldn't miss as much, but it's back on. So if I'm distracted, sorry. Pittsburgh looks postured pretty well for the future. I like the way, well, as a Flyers fan, you hate the way that looks, but good for the organization. Connor Ingram is going to enter the player assistance program. Our thoughts go out to him. He's dealing with the loss of his mother who had breast cancer. He's dealing with it a little hard. So he's going to enter the program, and that's where Vejmelka is going to start to get more volume, at least from the fantasy perspective. But on the human perspective, Connor, I just hope you're good. If you ever catch word of this, some storylines worth talking about. I've got a bunch of like post-trade deadline deployment things that we're going to get into. So these storylines aren't going to really touch on that too much, but we will cover it. The Avalanche, they're looking good. They're like, how many teams to beat are there in the league right now after the trade deadline? Like the Avalanche did everything. They addressed everything I think they needed to address, Brock Nelson, Charlie Coyle, and in season, they addressed their goaltending to the point where now Mackenzie Blackwood is one of the best fantasy goaltenders out there, and looks like he could carry them into a deep playoff run. So Avalanche look really strong. Dallas obviously looks really strong. Thomas Harley has more than made up for anything that Miro Heiskanen's not doing, whether it's being healthy, first of all, or second, just on the score sheet. Harley, this is one that I've been thinking about a lot. And I think like even after Miro comes back, you got to have Harley on the top unit. I don't know how you seed it back to Miro after what Harley's been doing and how he's been performing on that top power play. So I think Harley's a lock. Obviously seniority could play into it with Miro as he comes back, but we'll see. Florida, obviously they're going to look good. They're going to get Matthew Tkachuk back for the playoffs. They're going to get Marchand back. What's he, 3 to 4 weeks? I think his injury is still dealing with that. But Marchand, I would have him. I think you're going to have a total rat line, right? Like that's the rat pack is what they're calling them. Like if you have Marchand, Bennett, and Tkachuk all on one line, that's going to be devastating to anybody that's out on the ice with them. So that is a good line. They look really solid. They added Seth Jones maybe a week before the trade deadline. So they've done a little work on their back end. They addressed goaltending. They picked up, I think, Laurent Brossoit with Drieger going the other way and Spencer Knight going to Chicago. And Spencer Knight looks rock solid in Chicago too. So, from what we were seeing from him as a backup in Florida to what could and probably is like it, Mrazek's now a Red Wing, 3 goalies. They're going to rock with that. I really thought that was too many goalies to have, and they might trade him. But now you got Spencer Knight and Soderblom. And if that's a 50-50 split, I think the scales are going to tilt towards Spencer Knight. So, not a team that's going to be competing for anything, but a team that's definitely getting younger and is setting themselves up around Connor Bedard. So Spencer Knight going to get a lot of volume. So far, he's looked really good. I don't know if that's a confidence boost, what it is, but it's definitely not the Chicago defense. So we'll see. I'm pretty sure the floor is going to fall out at some point on that, but ride it while it's hot. You have to. All right. What else did I get? We got a bunch of like playoff spot jostling for position, things like that. Detroit's in it. The Rangers for sure. Columbus, Ottawa, like the East, there's a lot of jostling for pole position and just jostling to get into it. And I like keying in on those teams because they are like everybody's given 100%. And but these teams that are really hungry for wins and things like that, they're going to be out there, playing every game with everything they've got. So that's where I look when it comes to streamers. Like I use it as a tiebreaker. I'm not sorting by Ottawa regardless of the week or anything like that. But it always plays into it. let's get into some post-trade deadline deployment. The trade deadline was Friday. Saturday, we saw some, I think Brandon Tanev even played on his new team on Friday. So like Saturday, we got to see some lines come out, and there are some interesting ones worth talking about. I mean, Mikko Rantanen, obviously top line, top power play, but in maybe the most unlikely place that I think is a good place to start, Andrei Kuzmenko, man, top line, top power play in Los Angeles, which, you know, he's available on waiver wires, which is why I bring him up first. I like, and this is what I said on the trade deadline and after the Kuzmenko trade, like if he gets top power play, he turns into one of the more interesting pieces that got moved. And I think back to the Vancouver Canucks, where he was just a net front guy and, you know, was feasting off, number one, power play goals. Two, as a net front, he was good at tip-ins, rebounds, things like that. So he's just a really good net front presence there. And if he can hold it on the top power play, I think he could be a long-term ad. So this is not a good week for it because the LA Kings, if my memory serves, have 3 games, no off nights. So not the sexiest ad right now, but just somebody to put on your radar if LA starts to come up as somebody that's interesting based on the schedule. All right. So we did Kuzmenko. Let's get into Rantanen. Robertson, Hintz, Rantanen, that's your top line. The second line starts to get a little bolstered, and third line looks good too. The fourth, you know, they serve a purpose. Maverick Bork, we'll see. You know, he's trucking away, earning his way up. But right now, your top 9, Robertson, Hintz, Rantanen, Marchment, Duchesne, Granlund, Bend, Wyjo, and Dadonov. They are postured to be a very deep playoff team. And the top power play, Hintz, Rantanen, Robertson, Wyjo, and Harley. With an asterisk by Hintz, we'll see if, what do you do? He got hit in the face and like had to go to the hospital. I'm not sure if any new news has come out about that, whether or not he is okay, or if there's a timeline, or if there even needs to be a timeline. The last tweet that I see is that he was at the hospital getting tests done. So Duchesne, at the beginning of the game, while Hintz was still healthy, Duchesne had been moved down to power play 2. So he was the one that got knocked or lost value when Rantanen came onto the team. But then after Hintz went down, that's where Duchesne was the top power play guy again. So we'll see, you know, if Duchesne loses value long-term here, depending on Hintz's diagnosis, or if he's going to miss any time, things like that. And I'd be really curious to see what the lines look like for even strength too, because if somebody's going to be taking that top line center spot between Robertson and Rantanen, then you definitely want to get a piece of that. If it's Duchesne, if it's Wyjo, obviously they're gonna go up in value. Let's talk about Colorado now. Brock Nelson, Charlie Coyle. This is another team that has done a lot to solidify their top 9. They already had a pretty stellar defense. They've already addressed their goaltending, but now the top line, you know, with the caveat and fine print at the bottom of the commercial, right? Like lines are static day to day. So if I say Lehkonen is line 1, that could be different by tomorrow when you're listening to this, or later today, or whatever. But right now, Lehkonen, McKinnon, Nietzsche, Druin, Nelson, Nishushkin. That's your line 2. Kiviranta, Coyle, and Colton. And then Parker Kelly, Jack Drury, Logan O'Connor as your fourth line. This is a solid team, top to bottom, looking really good. Brock Nelson's getting some power play 2 time. That power play 2 looks mean too. Lehkonen, Nelson, Colton, Taze, and Girard as your power play 2. Power play 1, that's where you got Luke, but Nuke. He's doing a lot of like flip-flopping between that top unit, second unit. But right now, and especially after a hat trick, you can't really take him off the top power play, can you? Jonathan Druin playing second line and top power play. You got to love that. Nietzsche, obviously, McKinnon, Makar. So that is how they shook out their lines. Josh Norris debuted in Buffalo. This is I like this for his personal value, but I wonder if like the move from Ottawa to Buffalo kind of like washes out any extra, an extra 45 seconds of even strength time a night, just based on how much pucks go in the net. So you got Thompson, Tuck, and Norris as your top line. So they're doing a little bit of loading there. I guess Yuri Kulich goes back down. I don't see him in the lineup here. I'd like to see him like even strength and just in the NHL as kind of a fixture. I don't know if he got hurt. So if he got sent down, then I hope he comes back up. The second line, JJP, Peterka, McLeod, and Quinn. Benson, Krebs, Rosen as your third line. Top power play is Tuck, Norris, Peterka, Thompson, Dahlin. So top line, top power play for Josh Norris. That's a really good look. And what they've done is where Cousins was like a 2C, 3C, now they have a top line center. And to me, that's an upgrade. And they got Bernard Docker too. So, they gave up Cousins. I'm pretty sure there was picks passed back and forth, and I'm not sure who was on the losing end of the picks. But Norris is, yes, he's got a bigger cap hit. Yes, he's got shoulder and injury issues. But you never know. You don't draft for injury. Like ask Valenciano's this year, right? So I like top. How can you hate top line, top power play? So Josh Norris out there, I do dig it, and it gives him a little bit of a different flavor with Buffalo playoff schedules and things like that, which I'm pretty sure is close to Ottawa's playoff schedule. Maybe a couple different nights where a center only might make sense for you. So check that one out. Spencer Knight to Chicago. Like I said, he's been playing dead awesome, and you got to love it. So he's going to be getting some more volume, certainly more than he was getting in Florida. But you're also giving up the Florida ecosystem where there's offense to go around, and there's I don't want to talk shit on Chicago's defense, but like, man, they're at the bottom of the standings where Florida's at the top. So obviously this is not a better team, but he's playing exceptionally well. We'll see if somebody doesn't beat the bricks off him at some point. Another really fun one, Oliver Bjorkstrand to Tampa. A lot's been happening with Tampa in terms of like they've been a lot more happy-go-lucky with their lineup than they have been in recent seasons, where a lot of movement inside the even strength lines, and especially on the power play, where they experiment back and forth with like split power play units, Hedman on the second, or Gensel on the second unit, whatever. Right now, they're loading their top line and top power play. Well, not loading the top line because Kucherov's on line too. But again, this is a very good-looking top nine, where you find Oliver Bjorkstrand on the top line and on the top power play. So another really good speculative ad. Him and Norris and Kuzmenko both have top line, top power play as a result of a trade. So, and on like high octane offenses. Well, maybe not for Los Angeles. They're a really good home team, but in terms of like offense, whatever, in good positions. Let's say that, right? So for Bjorkstrand, I really love this move. Hagel, Cirelli, and Kucherov going into a week where Tampa does have a pretty decent schedule. From what I remember, I can't remember, to be honest with you. I feel like I was writing about them. Maybe they are. Yeah, 3 games, 0 off nights. So I do like Bjorkstrand. I'd probably have him. It's tough. I like him better than Kuzmenko in terms of like top line, top power play guys. But the fact that Tampa has been a lot less reliable with their lineup might wash it out. But 3 games, no off nights. If you can fit somebody like Bjorkstrand in, or even Kuzmenko, go for it. Because, with what I love about Bjorkstrand is just pure shot volume. Now he's got exposure to guys like Kucherov and Gensel and Point, and eventually Hedman once he does come back, which there were so many pissed off people in the Discord yesterday. People like rage tweeting at Yahoo because of the flip-flop scenario that was happening with Hedman, and he was out, he was in, and then eventually he was out after people took him off IR and dropped people, and that's tough. Yeah. Okay, so we talked BJ to Tampa. Let's talk Jake Wallman to Edmonton, which this one to me is a death certificate for Jake Wallman. In terms of his fantasy value, he is top pair right now. He is second power play, but keep in mind that Matthias Ekholm is out. So if Ekholm comes back, what happens to Jake Wallman at that point? And I feel like people that were rostering Jake Wallman did it because he was top power play in San Jose. He was big fish, small pond. Now he's like small fish, big pond. And it's a much different scenario. The points are going to be harder to come by. They're not going to be as many power play points just because of how much that top power play plays. And not only that, but there's also the uncertainty of what happens when Ekholm, if Ekholm comes back. So all those question marks and a devaluation just at face value, moving from top power play to second, with no hope in sight that he's going to edge out Bouchard. Like that's a hard bet to make. Nothing's impossible in hockey, but it's a really hard bet to make that he's going to, supplant Bouchard for top power play. So all of those things kind of point towards Jake Wallman being a drop for me. Defensemen are hard to come by, but we're seeing guys like Darren Radish right now even getting top power play while Hedman's out. Like what's to say you can't just cycle out and kind of moneyball your defense in a way where Jake Wallman, he's just going to be eating a roster spot and giving you like maybe Matthias Ekholm level power play points, which I'm a Matthias Ekholm owner. And it wasn't brutal, but when Ekholm comes back, Wallman's going to be moving down. At least that's my guess. So for me, Jake Wallman is a drop. Look to guys like Lowry and other guys that are getting some top power play time. Fabian Zetterlund and Dylan Cousins to Ottawa. We talked about the Josh Norris side of this trade, and Zetterlund, he's day-to-day right now, so we didn't get to see him line up, and I'm not sure if he has to deal with visa issues or anything like that. But Dylan Cousins, he played 17 and a half minutes, lined up with Batherson and Perron, which is on paper their line 2, but I think they were like third in terms of time on ice. So they were like technically the third line in the last game. But he's playing power play 2, good for hits, good for faceoffs if you're into that kind of thing. So Dylan Cousins does get a bit of a bump here moving from Buffalo, where he was unappreciated, to a new spot where he's cheaper than just Josh Norris. So maybe they give him a little more leash. I don't know. I like this spot if you're looking for hits. You can't really go too bad. And it's hard to say that with Zetterlund, like right maybe on the same line, because Zetterlund is a better hitter, but Cousins might get you a little more offense than Zetterlund, depending on like, is Zetterlund just a role player in Ottawa now, where San Jose, number one, there's no expectations, so you can kind of just like carte blanche, right? Like you just have free reign, dogs without chains, where go out, have fun, just try real hard. Now Ottawa is like, try real hard, but it means something. So I don't know. I get too much into the psychology aspect of it. Scott Laughton and Brandon Carlo to Toronto. This one doesn't have a ton of fantasy implications, I don't think, but it does bolster Toronto to the point where this is, I think, and I said this in the trade deadline stream, I think they might have the best team that they've ever gone into the playoffs with. And a lot of that comes from the goaltending that they have this year and how good it's looked. Anthony Stolar is looking really solid, doing a lot of that heavy lifting in terms of my evaluation of their reputation, I guess. But Matthew Nyes, Austin Matthews, Miss Marner, McMahon, Tavares, Nylander is your line 2. But Scott Laughton, he lines up with Domi and Pontus Holmberg. And Brandon Carlo, top pairing guy. But also keep in mind, Chris Tanev's out. So once Tanev comes back as well, you have an even better team. Really good defense in front of your goalies, who have been substantially better than they have been in previous years. We talked about Kuzmenko. So now let's talk about the flip side of every trade. So like Rantanen is out of Carolina. Brock Nelson's out of Long Island. Boston, their vacancies, and who fills in on the other side of these trades. Because that's an important and undercovered aspect of these trades, is like, yeah, you're losing a guy, but that means somebody else gets to move into their place. And it's kind of that case in Carolina, where Stankoven was part of the return. So he takes Rantanen's spot pretty much everywhere. Top line, top power play for Stankoven. So Rod Brindamore, famously unreliable when it comes to consistent playing time, unless you're named Sebastian Aho. So we'll see what happens with Stankoven. I wonder if shiny new toy, again, getting into hockey psychology, like if they need to justify how much they fumbled the puck here with Mikko Rantanen. There was a Frank Seravalli trade that was like they gave up Nietzsche, Drury, uh, X, Y, Z, and they wound up with Stankoven and a couple first round picks, and just how poor the Carolina management of prospects has been, and their assets, their asset management. Because what do they get? Like 30 some odd games out of Rantanen and Gensel, and they paid quite a bit for both of them. I know Putistinen, whatever, was part of it. Ponomarev. I'll have to find the tweet because it was a lot of stuff for like under 40 games of Gensel and Rantanen. Anyway, Stankoven as a top power play guy starts to get a little interesting. He was on like a 40-point pace in Dallas, but I think once, like, Dallas might be a better team, but I think Carolina has more opportunity for offense, especially the higher you go up the lineup, because there wasn't a lot of room for Stankoven to be top power play. But Carolina, especially on that right wing, you have a Jarvis, you have Jackson Blake to compete with. Stankoven has a real opportunity to make a name for himself and just really improve his stock and value. So I like him as a speculative watch list guy. He's not somebody that I'm going to immediately throw onto my roster just based on trade hype, things like that. But if Carolina has a good schedule or anything like that, he'll be one of my priority ads when I'm thinking about Carolina. From this one, I mean, I love JGP. I want to talk about the Islanders now. I love JGP as a 2C, but just like the vacancy from Nelson leaving on the power play, like, what does it matter, really? I feel like that one was a net negative because everybody, I'm pretty sure Nelson, yeah, he might have given you, a more power play time by slight margin. But the guys that the Islanders have to add to the power play as a result of this vacancy, it doesn't make the power play better. I'm pretty sure Anthony Duclair is now getting a power play spot, who was a healthy scratch not too long ago. So for this one, it's just the power play is a mess. I think JGP gets a little more hits. He gets a little more faceoffs, gets a little more ice time. So for me, JGP moves up a little bit in value. Nothing breaking into the priority ad territory, anything like that. Boston, Elias Lindholm to me is like, he's 32% rostered. So a lot of you have already caught on, but I think he's a drop. Casey Middlestat came over from one of the trades. I'm pretty sure the Charlie Coyle trade. Middlestat is line 2 center and power play 1, which actually is super interesting in the short term, because as soon as Boston finds out who Casey Middlestat is and how he plays and just what his true value is, that's going to be short-lived. So in the short term, Casey Middlestat, remember, like early this year, he was on fire. Casey Middlestat was like 60% rostered, and it was, he was paying dividends time over, like, hand over fist. So while that happens in Boston, I could see it happening again. Power play 1 with Pasta, line 2 with whoever they have on their line 2. But Lindholm is now power play 2. Lindholm's now third line center. So for me, that's a hard drop. San Jose, Jake Wallman leaving the scene. They're running a 5-forward power play, but I think Liljegren is going to be that next man up. And when you see teams run a 5-forward power play, that to me signals a lack of confidence in that next man up. So I feel like Liljegren might not have like full confidence from the coach, and if that 5-forward power play doesn't work out, I feel like Liljegren is going to be a guy. Almost in this, like, if Lohrei and Faber and those guys had a tier below, or like a B tier inside that tier, that's probably where I'd have Liljegren. All right, pick goes up 1-0. Malkin with a goal. Cool. Everybody loves live updates from a podcast that they're going to be listening to the next day. All right, so that's what I've got as far as like trade deadline deployment updates and things like that. Injury report. We talked about Jack Hughes. We talked about Dougie. Matt Kachuk, LTIR, likely out for the rest of the season unless another injury pops up and opens up enough roster and cap space for him. Semyon Varlamov, season-ending injury. And we're going to see Sorokin with a heavy workload. Who is it, Hogberg, that they have over there? Or Hellberg or something. But that backup is just, he's not going to see a lot of time, not at all. Hogberg. So Sorokin's going to see some volume. Brad Marchand, another 3-4 weeks for him. We're going to see, I can't tell if that's my actual voice or the microphone. Makes me feel like I have a frog in my throat. All right. Brad Marchand, Rupe Hintz, we're going to see what happens with him. Victor Hedman, day-to-day, and that's Darren Radish, who's benefiting in the short term. John Gibson, day-to-day, so Dostal is your spot stream, and they have Billy Huso now. So they'll split starts, but I think Dostal is the guy. Long-term ads, let's get into a little bit through the playoff push. And this is irrespective of playoff schedules and different playoff formats, because, if I go out and say, Jonathan Drouin's got a good playoff schedule, somebody's going to be like, well, not in my league. And that's just the way that fantasy hockey works. But these are just kind of like blanket ones. So for a guy like Jonathan Drouin, 22% rostered, he's got an elevated role with this post-deadline shake up and things like that. I like Johnny Drouin right now in terms of deployment, because I've never liked who he is from a production standpoint. But being completely objective, he has 6 points in his last 8 games to go with 12 shots, which, under 2 a game. But with the deployment that he's getting right now, it's hard to ignore. Brock Nelson, you got to like what he's doing, but his ownership is a little high to be like, yeah, you can go out and get him. I'm pretty sure he's like 60 some odd percent or something like that, especially with 67%. There he is. So after the trade deadline, all these moved guys that go to powerhouse teams get real shiny and get added a lot. So 67% could even be outdated by the time you listen to this. Luke Hughes, he's one of my priority ads, especially long-term. He's got that power play 1 role locked with the Hamilton injury. It looks like it's week to week, could be a while. And Oliver Bjorkstrand, OBJ, is a top 6 guy right now and top power play. So I like the way that looks. It's really hard to find a problem with a top power play guy in Tampa. And where's he at in terms of ownership? 18%, guys. You can definitely go get an OBJ, especially if you've got the space for it this week on a 3-game 0 off night week, and kind of just have them in your back pocket for the rest of the season. Spencer Knight, if you're looking for goalies, like if you are moneyballing your goalies via 0G going into the playoffs, Chicago, I mean, you just found a new volume starter. So hopefully he can produce enough and consistently enough that can get you through the playoffs. If not, just lean on him for a spot start here and there. Chicago goalies are hard to really hang your hat on. Mason Lohrei in Boston, I think he's a pretty good ad for power play 1. Charlie McAvoy's on IR. Doesn't look like he's coming back anytime soon. So Lohrei, he's got it. Drop candidates. I talked about Jake Wallman. I talked about Elias Lindholm. Anthony Duclair is going to be up there for me. Maybe Victor Olofsson out of Vegas. Any of these guys, like the worst teams to stream from this week. The Game Grid has it a little differently than I do, but that's just based on the Game Grid's algorithm. It's got a mind of its own, guys. But who's playing 2 games? It's Calgary and Dallas, right? Which it's kind of tough for Mikko Rantanen owners who saw a glimpse of hope that he got out of that Carolina lifestyle and performance, but they don't play until this weekend. But they do have that Friday Sunday split. So once Alan and Jay take the mic for the weekend preview, Dallas is going to start to come back. But until then, they literally don't play any games. So they do have one of the worst schedules. Calgary is the other team. They're going to play on 2 heavy nights. Is that right? No, sorry, 2 off nights, but they're middle of the week. They only have 2 games. If you have limited ads, I just don't see looking at Calgary for any real reason. And in fact, unless you are really leaning on somebody for Wednesday and Friday, those peripheral guys outside of like the top performers, you can probably pitch out. Best teams to stream from: Utah, Detroit. They both have the perfect schedule that we all go for. And this time it actually means something because the heavy nights are a little heavier than they were last time somebody had a perfect schedule. And the light nights are pretty light too. 4 games Monday, 4 Wednesday, 6 Friday, 7 on Sunday. Love that heavy Sunday for anybody looking for a last-ditch effort, whether it's in your playoffs or trying to get into the playoffs. And a 7-game Sunday and it's an off night, it goes a long way. So what I want to do now is start to talk about some of these guys that are coming out of it and some of the other best teams to stream from. I have Utah and Detroit kind of as the top teams right now, just based on schedule. 4 games, 4 off nights. Then you got Edmonton, and every time they come up, there's nothing really to talk about, despite their ads, despite Jake Wallman and Max Jones and Vasily Podkolzin and Victor Arvidsson. Like every time we talk about these guys, I hate to think about somebody adding and then just getting 0 points from. So yes, if you feel so inclined, go check out the Edmonton Oilers for 4 games, 3 off nights. But otherwise, I just don't see any bets that feel like a sure thing. Colorado's got 4 games, 3 off nights. Anaheim, same deal. Vancouver with 4-2. Vegas has 4-1. But I think Vegas is a good enough team, and maybe you might be able to squeeze somebody in there. The heavy nights are 11, 9, and 11, so kind of heavy. But that Thursday, it's a little cushy. Then you got Seattle with 3 games, 3 off nights. Winnipeg with 3-2. Florida with 4-1. Ottawa, same deal, 4-1. New York Rangers, 4-1 as well. And the worst schedules, we talked about those: Calgary and Dallas, both with only 2 games. Calgary does have 2 off nights, 2 games, so whatever. And actually, I think Dallas does too. Yeah, Friday, Sunday, right? So that must be why the game grid has them favored a little bit. Like not truly the least or the least score for off nights. It gives more weight to an off night than it does to total games played. And also it takes into account like offense and defense, which is why Dallas is not in the bottom 10 teams, but still has a pretty bad schedule. So it's add it to your arsenal. It's an extra tool. It's not gospel. Streamer suggestions. This is where we're going to get into some names and some actionable advice. Utah: Logan Cooley, Nick Schmaltz, Sean Durzi. And I'd even throw Barrett Hayton in there if he's somebody that winds up hitting the radar in any fashion. Has 4 goals and 3 assists in his last 9 games, his last 30 days. So I've got Yahoo up here with 30-day stats. Line 2, power play 1 for Barrett Hayton, and only 11% rostered. Center only, which is a little tough, but 4 games, 4 off nights, you probably have that kind of room. Guys like Logan Cooley, center only as well, 2 goals, 2 assists in his last 6 games since coming back, 43% rostered. Has a higher ceiling than Barrett Hayton, in my opinion, especially playing with guys like Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz, who are both pretty red hot right now. Like Schmaltz is starting to schmaltz. And you got Logan Cooley smack dab in the middle of that. The problem with this is that I'm pretty sure Logan Cooley's on power play too. So it's the classic case of like, do you take Hayton, who's line 2, power play 1, with worse even strength partners who he's going to spend most of his game with, or do you go for that high upside power play? Whereas I think Logan Cooley has higher upside altogether. So pick your poison on those 2 guys. My number 1 ad out of Utah would be Nick Schmaltz, line 1, power play 1, center and right wing, and has 8 points in his last 9 games. Is really starting to pick up the pace. Clayton Keller, who's got 15 points in his last 9 games, playing on the same line, same power play. So you get a little bit of that collateral damage, those what do they call it, shrapnel points. Detroit's next up. Patrick Kane, just go check at 58%. It gets really hard to put your name beside anything else. Outside of that, that's where guys like Marco Casper start to come into the mix, like Simone Edmonton. JT Compher, God forbid. So I feel like Patrick Kane is kind of where it starts and ends here. Somebody's going to come out of the woodwork and prove me wrong, but I just don't feel like I have that dart to throw right now. Edmonton, same kind of deal. Like somebody's going to be scoring, they're going to get a couple points, and I don't feel like that target is even available for me to throw a dart at. So go for it. Vander Kane also noted he's not going to play this season, so he's not even going to be a playoff ad. Colorado, the next team up, worth talking about. 67% Brock Nelson. Just go check. I love the way that he's deployed right now. Line 2, power play 2 just gives you like Nazem Kadri vibes a little bit without like the grit, just in terms of deployment and potential production out of somebody like Brock Nelson. I know Kadri was power play 1, but hey, it's what you can do. I would actually add Nichushkin over Nelson, and Nichushkin's a little bit more available at 54%. But then you got guys like Druin at 22, Ross Colton at 8%. So there are guys out there worth checking out in Colorado. Anaheim, there are a bunch of folks to check out, especially from your bangers too, like Trouba, Gudis. If you need bangs out of there, go for it. But guys like Mason McTavish at 15%. Sorry, my daughter just tried to FaceTime me. Jackson Lacombe, 60%. Like, just go check on him. He really needs more love. This is a good week to go check him out. If you are somebody like a Jake Wallman owner and Lacombe is out there, that's an easy swap for me to make. I think he was maybe the guy that's in that tier for me with the low rye and names like that. Leo Carlson's on a mean hot streak right now. He's worth checking out. See if you can't get the tail end of that hot streak, or maybe it's the meat of the hot streak. Maybe we're smack dab in the middle of it. Jacob Trouba, 37% for your bangs. Troy Terry. There are plenty of guys out there who get the deployment, who are going to get big minutes in Anaheim that you can just go straight up pick up. There are 8 points for Troy Terry in his last 9 games. Jacob Trouba, where's he at with hits? 20 hits in his last 9 games. Gudis has almost 40. Jackson Lacombe has 10 points in his last 8 games. And 2 of them are power play points. Frank Vetrano, 8 points, but he's 69% rostered. There are guys out there who are really making the most of what they can, and Leo Carlson is kind of at the forefront of it. Line 2, power play 2, Leo Carlson, 11% rostered, 5 goals, 4 assists in his last 9 games on 14 shots. So on sustainability, be damned, he's doing it. So go check out what's going on in Anaheim. See if you can't get a couple points out of those guys. Vancouver, a couple bangers worth checking out. Kiefer Sherwood, always at the top of the list here. 49 hits in his last 8 games, 37% rostered. Philip Hronik, he's going to get power play 1 until Quinn Hughes comes back. 44% rostered right now. Philip Hedel, Connor Garland, Jake DeBrusk, also guys that you could look to for a little offense. Vegas, you got guys like Barbashev, Brett Howden, who has been doing it, but again, I feel like this is maybe the second or third week in a row I've said this. Like, Brett Howden just keeps doing it, and I keep saying, like, I don't buy into it, but he keeps doing it. So Brett Howden, he's got 8 points in his last 7 games. No power play points, no power play deployment, but with under 15 minutes of power play time, he's got 7 assists and a goal in there too. So love the way that looks for him. It just feels like really, I don't know if again, for the third week in a row, whatever, like, I don't know. Riley Smith is back. So line 4, power play 2 right now. We'll see what he can put together and where he eventually lines up in Vegas once the ripple effect kind of settles down. There's guys like Dorofiev who we, find ourselves keep coming back to the well. Only 2 goals and 1 assist in his last 7 games, but he's shooting a bunch. So he's trying. Barbashev's right up there with him in terms of guys that I'd really be looking towards if Vegas is something that you find yourself needing to have. Seattle, Shane Wright has got himself a unsustainable little run here, doesn't he? So his name is being said on this podcast probably for the first time this year. 3 goals, 5 assists in his last 8 games, and that's on 9 shots. So 33% shooting percentage. Take it for what it is. But guys like Tolvanen might be able to do something. He only has 2 goals in his last 8 games. Something's up in Seattle right now. Like, nobody's really putting together like a reputable offensive sheet in the last 30 days, except for Shane Wright, and that's worrisome. Vince Dunn, he's doing his thing, but Jared McCann has been a really tough long-term hold and really tough to drop. 57% right now, but only 3 points in his last 8 games. So he's somebody who, that's tough, right? That's, you put some draft capital into him, and he's just not high draft capital or anything, but he just feels like one of those guys that you hover over the drop button and you just can never get there because of the ceiling that we've seen before. Winnipeg, we've talked about these guys a ton, Perfetti, even Nemesnikov, maybe a Niederreiter if you're desperate. But I feel like the bangs that are available in Winnipeg are what's most attractive. If you're in categories league, something like that. You just added Luke Shen, who is going to hop to the top of their hits leaders. You've already got guys like Dylan DeMello, and there's so many bangs that can be had here. Mark Scheifele even has 20 hits. Like, they just hit hard. Neil Pionk is a big hitter. Adam Lowry is a big hitter. DeMello, like I said, Brandon Tanev now on this team. Like, a lot of guys are going to bang you up, and Winnipeg just got heavier, adding Luke Shen and Brandon Tanev. So that's where I'd be looking there. If you need offense out of Winnipeg, that's where Perfetti, that's where he comes into. Florida, Sam Bennett is a 54%. Just go check. And I'd even say like Anton Lindell is worth checking out right now. 33% rostered. Like, if you do need something out of Florida, then by all means. I have to send something to my daughter here because she's like, "Why aren't you answering my call?" So I'm just taking a little picture, guys. Sorry. I like Samoskevich too, outside of Florida, so he could be somebody worth looking at. But I just feel like the amount of names that I've talked about this episode, that thinking about somebody like a Samoskevich or a Lindell just doesn't make sense based on, number 1, better schedules, 2, better deployment, 3, better probability of offense, things like that. So once we get down to here, it does kind of feel like we're just curating. And I feel like you don't need to look at a Lindell or a Samoskevich, but if you're in a deep enough league, those are guys worth looking at. Bennett is somebody I'd put closer to the top of the list. And the guys for Winnipeg, you just want to talk about bangs because that could speak to a particular subset of the fantasy community. Ottawa, there are a couple of players worth talking about. Giroux is, he's trial eligible. He always comes up, but he's just been so cold that I feel like this is probably not the week to be talking about him. Dylan Cousins, shiny new toy, getting second line, second power play time out there. 29% rostered. He's going to provide a decent peripheral floor, especially in face-off leagues, and playing with Perron and Batherson at even strength. He's bound to get some shrapnel points. So I don't know if that's a terrible thing. I can't wait to see where Zetterlund winds up because he's he's like one of my guys. Great blocker, great hitter, throws some offense in there, can play on the power play, can play shorthanded. He feels like a bottom 6 guy to me when you look at Ottawa's roster. But at 24%, once he gets back, I don't know if it's a visa thing or if he's hurt. Or if it's both. So once he hits the roster, check out where he is in the lineup and make your decision then. New York, I feel like I only want to talk about Will Cooley. 7 points in his last 10 games, 35% rostered, 34 hits, 18 shots in his last 10 games played. So fantastic stat line there. I feel like Nick Schmaltz is kind of the top ad this week. That's going to feel super biased and really typecast for me. But other guys like Nishushkin, you should really go out and check out. A lot of the Just Go Check guys, the new faces in new places. Kuzmenko is a big one that I'm excited about. Bjorkstrand, regardless of schedule. Like, I feel like there are ways you can make your roster better without focusing on just this week. Obviously, my tone would change if this is a playoff week where this week is the only week that matters. But if you're setting yourself up for the future, I think there are ways you can definitely make your team better. Banger streams, Truba, Gudis, Norris, even Will Cooley, Kiefer Sherwood, guys like Boone Jenner, even Luke Shen is going to be out there. So plenty to talk about there. That's it. That's all I've got for you guys. So that was a damn 50 minutes. Yeah, I'm thirsty. So that's it. I'm going to throw the outro music. Aman, I see you in the chat asking your questions. I will get to you, but I'm just going to let the outro play so that I can snip and just post it in that fashion. So that's going to be the outro right there. All right. Do my spiel, right? So that's it for me here in San Francisco. You can see the Transatlantic, Transamerica building, something or other right there. We're in downtown San Fran. And I'm flying from 11 p.m. tonight till 7 a.m. tomorrow. So it's going to be a terrible night. But yeah, if you guys want to keep me busy in the meantime, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at FHF Hockey and the Fantasy Hockey Discord. Feel free to chirp me there. Here on YouTube, you can leave comments and I'll get back to you. Until next time, love you guys. Bye.